Hello, and welcome to Cabinet Conversations. I'm Erica Scott, the Artistic Programming Manager at Ford's Theater. If you are joining us for the first time, this is our live series exploring creativity, history, and leadership. You can learn more and explore our past programs by visiting our website at www.fords.org. Now, you might be wondering, what does President Lincoln have to do with AI? Much in the way that we find Lincoln and his legacy everywhere, artificial intelligence influences nearly every aspect of our lives, from communication and education to historical preservation and artistic creation. President Lincoln was fascinated by the technological innovations that blossomed during the Civil War. Today, we'll draw a line from Lincoln's embrace of technology to today's AI revolution. Please welcome Jason Jamerson, Miriam Vogel, and Allison Wilkins to the conversation. Jason Jamerson is the director of the XR Studio at LSU, a professor of virtual production and immersive media, and a 20-year veteran of the entertainment industry in New York City. Miriam Vogel is president and CEO of Equal AI and a recognized leader in AI governance and policy. Allison Wickens, leads the Education and Guest Services Division at George Washington's Mount Vernon and oversees the history and civic learning goals for the institution's on-site, off-site, and digital outreach programs. Welcome to you all. As a reminder to all of our viewers, we are taking your questions on social media platforms. Please feel free to submit so that we may share your questions with our guests during the program. All right, now that that's all out of the way, let's start. Could each of you tell us a little bit about the work that you are doing and how you have integrated AI into your process? Jason, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, at LSU, we're using AI in a variety of ways, from projects related to STEM and engineering to creative design projects. For the past 3 years, we were creating a digital twin for NASA of their rocket assembly facility in New Orleans. And today, NASA can have a conversation with the factory. They can talk to it and query data about temperature, humidity, supply chain, project management. We're also doing preservation projects, making interactive galleries, virtual exhibits, and bringing history to life in ways that it was never able to be before, partnering primarily with the LSU Museum of Art and some regional historical societies. We're also doing more, me personally, consulting production designers because I'm an old school theater designer by training. So consulting production designers on doing more in their design process in the deadline and the timeline that they have available. So lots of different ways we're trying to bring these things together.
Cool. Allison?
Well, in contrast to Jason, I think we're sort of tiptoeing in this area, and I'm really benefiting from being a part of this conversation. I mean, I think like a lot of organizations, we're experimenting with ChatGPT and just sort of like how can we improve work processes, but our one of our major projects where we're really trying to engage this new technology is in our exhibitions and trying to work with descendants of the enslaved community here at Mount Vernon, building their oral histories and our historical record into creating AI-generated artwork of their ancestors, and really trying to think about the ways in which exhibition, which relies so heavily on imagery, to tell a fuller story of Washington's past. There are so many portraits of George Washington painted, but when we want to tell an exhibition story of George Washington, we want to make sure that people can see all of the people around him, not just the ones who had their portraits painted. So AI has been a really helpful tool to be able to integrate the historic photography from a descendant's family line, so using 19th and 20th century photographs to then merge into a newly created portrait from the 18th century.
Wow.
That's our major sort of tiptoeing.
Major tiptoeing, super major tiptoeing. That's really, really cool. Miriam.
Yeah, that's tiptoeing. I don't know what big steps are. That is so cool, Allison. So again, I'm Miriam Vogel and I run Equal AI, and I'm thrilled you're having this conversation. Not only because I get to hear about the exciting ways that you all are using AI, but it's just so important that more people use AI. And that's our primary focus with Equal AI. We do a lot of work to make sure that AI is trusted, and the only way it can be trusted is if it deserves our trust. And so we work with companies to align on what does it mean to govern this technology. We're at this novel time where AI is being used by most companies, and yet there's not certainty on what it means to have AI governance in place, what it means to be a good actor, what it means to be responsible and trustworthy. And so we bring leaders and experts together with industry policymakers to align on what does a best practice in this space look like right now, and how can we make sure as many people as possible know about it. And we do that in a variety of ways through our programs. And the other side of our house is very focused on AI literacy. So exactly the conversation we're having here today, making sure that the only way that people will benefit from AI is, first of all, they have to know that they are using it. So while those of us listening today think that they may not be using it, this very medium is using AI. So we are all using it throughout the day. And it's really important that, first of all, we level set and understand how we're using it. Second of all, there's so much fear about AI, and that's completely understandable. There's a lot to understand, and new concepts and unknowns. And there's a lot of reason that people would feel concerned, whether it's their work, whether it's how to use it. So we try to manage what are the actual risks involved here. We look at them in 9 different categories. We try to explain it to as many people as possible so that they can understand what it is to be on the lookout for, what are some mitigation strategies, and then what are some ways that they can use it to propel their work, whether it's something as groundbreaking as creating new pictures of our first president, to understanding how it can write better emails to you when you're really mad and you ask Claude or ChatGPT, how do I write this email in such a way that I am seeming a little less friendly than I'm feeling right now?
That's fair. And to be honest, I do use AI to write some emails sometimes, because you just want to make sure you have all the right language in there. You don't want to sound repetitive, and it does help when you edit it. You can't just copy and paste. That's a great segue into, kind of how we built this conversation. We want to talk about what is scary up front so that we can get to all of the good. And anytime that humans are faced with the unknown, we tend to be cautious, we tend to be resistant, we tend to be fearful. And as AI gets more sophisticated, the question then becomes, how do we discern between what's real and what's augmented? And so I'm glad that you already started in your intro there, Miriam, touching on what you do to help mitigate some of that. So I'm going to throw this first question out here to you. What are some of these issues that are being addressed through AI policy and governance? Like what are people doing to keep safe?
Yeah, well, and there's a bunch of different ways to look at who needs to be keeping us safe. A lot of people are looking to the regulators, to Congress and legislators to put rules on the books. And there is a place for that. We do need to understand there's copyright law. Well, in copyright law, we know that an AI itself, a machine, cannot create a copyrightable work. We know that it requires some human intervention. How much? That's still a question that we are answering. We need to know what is a best practice. We need to know what are standards that each company, each organization using AI in pivotal functions needs to know about how to test, what to test, how often to test. So rather than leaving it to each organization to find this out on their own, we need to have some certainty as to what a good actor, a responsible actor should be looking at in this space. And we've come a long way. So, we have the EU AI Act with legislation that is impacting anyone who does business in the EU, or is any way affiliated with when their AI is affiliated with EU citizens. And we've seen that as well in South Korea and several different countries. We've seen the UN and other international organizations start to answer these questions on where are places we can look to align on best practices, and what are some of these questions we need to be answering. More and more, this is going to be happening in the courts. So, that very example of copyright law, there are basic constructs in our laws in our country and every country across the globe. And more of the courts are going to start answering, and have started to answer, what does this look like in the AI context when we're talking about tort law, harms, personal injury, contracts, and so forth. So the courts play a real outsized role in helping to us understand what governance is going to look like. And then a lot of this comes down to the companies and organizations using AI. How often are you checking? Is it doing what you're expecting it to do? And the bottom line that we want everyone to ask when they're thinking about their AI system, when they're testing it, is, for whom could this fail? I think that's the bottom line we should all be thinking about in AI governance, no matter which is your purview, the courts, legislatures, an actor, a user. For whom could this fail? What was the expected use case? Is my use expected? Am I an expected user? And that's how we decide if it's safe, and if it's acting, if it's being governed appropriately.
That's really interesting. Allison, Miriam mentioned copyright, and she mentioned, the laws in place. And as historians, we've been dealing with inherent biases in the historical record forever. And AI kind of complicates things just a little bit if you don't know how to use it correctly. So and the question could really be, is there worry about, with the development of AI, there being even more potential for faster rate of this perpetuated bias? So what are some of these questions? What are some of the questions in the field that are being asked in the historical realm? Because I think it's really interesting that you all are using AI to take images of ancestors to create new images of ancestors. So what are some of these biases? What are some of the things that worry you?
Yeah, I think they sort of fall into two camps, and you're right. The thing about AI is it's not introducing anything that humans haven't been responsible for in the past, in terms of bias of interpretation, and sometimes singular narratives moving forward. But what I saw, a couple things. When we work with historians to help create these portraits, they're bringing their own expertise about the depth of knowledge they have on 18th century dress, hairstyles, clothing, things like that. And the opportunity for them to contribute to the AI knowledge of having that expertise, if they're contributing that into our portraits. Do they want those then to go into AI to help increase the accuracy? Or are they somehow feeding the enemy by putting their work into the AI universe? And so there's this idea of, as we create these expertly driven portraits based on photographs by real people, do we want to contribute to that generation of portraits greater in more ways, or do we want to sort of keep that protected from entering the AI sort of like world? And each one of our historians and descendant family members, have the opportunity to engage in that question. For our work purposes, we are sort of, once we generate images, we're sort of, keeping them protected from going back out until they are publicly released. But the other thing I think that illustrates the important questions to ask, just early on in this process, when we were just sort of testing out the AI process of portraiture generation, it's amazing how quickly, starting with an African-American photograph and an African-American prompt, those AI generated images just started turning white, right? Like, you just start running them through the algorithm, and the default is a white face, and a white person or a white image. And so like that realization early on in the process is how little we could trust it on its own. and how much it was really important to engage the software and in integrating some key elements from the historic photography and the written documents. But we couldn't just let it run because the system was so default to white Americans as opposed to Black Americans, and the portraits we wanted to create were those who were African American in the past. And so really interesting sort of to discover that through the process.
It sounds like, and you all know more about this than even I do, because I am also learning, but it sounds like, you know, you can't just ask AI a question. You can't just go to ChatGPT and be like, show me African Americans from 1865. You may not get exactly that. You need to be a lot more specific. You need to be purposeful in your language. So it sounds like you taught the software how to give you what you needed. And that is, in itself, is so profound that you have to teach this software in order to get the results that you would like. And that's really interesting. Also, the biases that it falls right into what America may consider more American. You know, when you think about America, you may first think about white people. And so that may be why the software pushed that out. And I think that that's such a fascinating area to find yourself in when using AI and how specific you need to be. Speaking of art, I want to talk to you, Jason. Is AI art actually real art? Because we're seeing a emergence of AI art coming out. And I think that, Allison, your organization is like kind of on this fence where you have real people, but you are creating images versus telling AI to paint me a picture. So Jason, could you talk a little bit about, is AI art real art? And what are some of the ramifications for the human artists as these technologies make it easier for people to generate content?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm a big advocate for using AI as a tool for artists and designers. I think that it's going to, like any other time any industry has been disrupted, usually that industry explodes in quality and quantity. It's very hard to define art. A definition that I've used for myself is you have a message and you choose a medium for that message based on how that medium enriches your message. If you've chosen dance, it's because dance brings something to what you're trying to say or a feeling you're trying to communicate. If it's painting, the qualities of the medium itself enriches your message or your idea. And so if a person is involved and has a message and they're using AI as a tool, as a creative tool, and what they have in the end is representative of their intentions, then I think that AI art is art. There's also craft, which is just the product of, if you follow these steps, then you get this thing, right? That could also be a way that AI tools exist in our society and in our creative works, and both of those things are valid. But I do think the newness of this is going to fade in time. We have a problem here at LSU where people don't even know that they're using AI. In Photoshop, if you're clicking on an object to select it and remove it from the background, that's now being done with AI. We were talking earlier about how a lot of us started with typewriters or simple word processors or before phones or internet. Well, our students today are using, for word processing, using software called Grammarly that now has AI features that we didn't necessarily ask for. And as an educator, I'm very concerned about assessment, because we want our students to gain fluency in the foundational truths of whatever their areas or topics are. And yet all of our methods of assessment, or many of them, are completely broken, like fundamentally don't work with a lot of the AI tools that are out there. That doesn't mean the students don't want that, but what will the future hold?
We have a question that I think aligns right to what you just said, Jason. Do you think that people are turning to AI for the answers for research purposes, or do you think that most people know to take AI or whatever the answer is with a little bit of skepticism?
I think it's both. I think everyone knows it's skepticism. I think there are inherent weaknesses in the educational system that we've relied on, saying, oh, write a 20-page paper, write a 15-page paper. It's due on Friday. And professors could get away with that because they had to do it. Now they don't have to do it. We're finding that students have just been, they have skepticism, but they also are just trying to get their work done. When I'm sitting here writing a grant and I have AI lay out the structure of it, I'm just trying to get my work done too. So we all know, but the positive version or the optimistic version is that AI can free us from the repetitive or laborious mental tasks so that we can look more closely at the big picture and get more done. We're better editors than we are fast creators. So if it frees us up, that's good. But if fundamental things, like my students don't fundamentally learn the truths that I need them to take away to grow as people, that's a huge problem.
Are you able to spot? Oh, go ahead, Allison. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the idea that Jason presented that like people don't always know then when they're using AI or when it's being applied. So therefore, how can they be skeptical of it as well? Right. So the idea of, the question about skepticism does assume there's an awareness. And I think that's one of the big challenges to the growing field. I mean, I know that I still have the little radar tuned if I'm reading something and I'm like, AI generated, right? And we have the little websites we could like plop the text into and be like, yeah, this was all AI generated or, partially. And so we have those tools, but at the same time, one of the biggest challenge, I think, in terms of finding answers is having the appropriate context for those answers, especially if you're asking historical questions. So I'm sure you guys get this at Ford's Theater. I've seen so many George Washington AI avatars, right? That are they're loaded with all of Washington's things he ever wrote down. So they're ready to answer any Washington question. And boy, those answers make no sense at all. Even if you put them in vernacular, it's like they don't make sense because the 18th century context for his ideas is so important to understand. And so building out the ability to like weigh that in, it's not just the right history and getting the facts right, is also making sure that the students or the people interacting with that experience understand why Washington was thinking about those things, like why that was so important to him, because he lived a whole life before saying or writing that thing. It's not just a flash, a moment in the pan.
And just to underscore the importance of this question, I'm so glad the commentator brought it up. I'm so glad, Erica, you brought it up. Common Sense Media had a study recently and found that only 4 in 10 teens could determine when they were exposed to inaccurate content. Now, they came to understand it when there was a discussion about whether generative content was reliable. So once you had that conversation, you could be more skeptical, you could learn about it. But what's also interesting about that data point is that there is a gender and a data and an age and a regional gap. There are all sorts of gaps as to who's adopting AI. If you are younger, you're more likely to use AI. So while in this study, only 4 in 10 recognized that it was inaccurate or could be inaccurate content, that's probably much more savvy than the average person who, again, first of all, you have to know it was generated content by AI, and then second of all, know to question. There's this bias towards computer science. A computer created it, it must be accurate. And that's what gave us, generated content that people should drink stones for nutrition and other dangerous information that has come to make us all realize we need to be skeptical. Once you know it, once you realize that, like Allison pointed out with the images that were false of historical features, Purdue University did a study on that as well and found that large language models struggle to recognize accurately faces of Black and brown people. Once people were made aware of that, they became skeptical not only of the faces that was presented or whether faces are being portrayed accurately, but general skepticism. So once your eyes have been open to it, you're no longer as prone to be subject to misinformation.
It's one of those things like where you realize that AI knows a lot, but not everything. So like it may know that you have 2 eyes, but it may not know where those 2 eyes go, right? So like those types of little hidden gems, if you will, that bring you around and help you realize that this is not completely correct, not completely accurate all the time.
So it's trained on the historical record. That
Mhm.
involves every piece of data we've ever had. And the historical record is full of inaccuracies, fiction, and lies and opinions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and it's not just historical records. I mean, that's the hard part. It's conversations. It's Reddit. I mean, imagine if all your child knew was conversation from Reddit conversations. That's what an LLM is often trained on. So there's a lot of imbalance as well as accurate biases. If you're talking about medical information, a lot of the large language models are fed on, you need huge amounts of data in order for it to learn. Well, who is represented in that medical data? Oftentimes it is males of European descent. And so if you're asking it for it to diagnose your symptom and you are a female having a heart attack, it could get it wrong because not inaccuracies in the data, but who has been trained upon more accurately in the data sets.
I want to talk a little bit about, we mentioned AI in the classroom, and, professors are probably becoming more and more keen on when things are AI generated, when papers are turned in AI generated. But, when I was a young woman in college, we had, what was the name of that software where you could put it in and it would tell you if you had plagiarized from a book? There was plagiarism software that existed back in the day. That has clearly changed now that we have ChatGPT and we have all of these other platforms. But what it sounds like is, you have to tell the system. And so when you have to tell the system and when you're pulling from stuff, who owns the system? So maybe Miriam, I think you can talk a little bit about copyright issues and creative property. Like, who owns the creation? How do we control who owns the system or who owns the creation of things if AI is pulling answers from various points on the internet?
Well, there is actually still that solution. I'm putting it in quotes because it should not be relied on exclusively, where there are AI detection tools. But again, we have to go into this with skepticism because I'm sure we all know people for whom this was wrong. There's also data out there that it's being misapplied across race. So there's a propensity for students of color to be misidentified as having plagiarized with AI as compared to their white peers. So we have to, if you're using the tools, it has to be one of many data points. But the bottom line question you're asking, Erica, of how far can we go with relying on these systems? I think the good news is I don't think humans go out of business. I think it's our choice to maintain agency. It's our choice to make sure that it is a tool to augment our powers, to enhance our powers, but not to be the sole decisive factor, whether it's being used to detect AI or generate any other answer. A lot of our work, as I mentioned, is AI governance. And what's so interesting about AI governance is it's not very different at all than good governance. It's about making sure you have a plan, a framework that you're using to decide when it's safe to use AI. It's making sure you have accountability. At the end of the day, if you are going to choose to put AI in your organization, then I argue you then have the mandate to make sure there's accountability at the highest levels, to make sure that it's used safely, to make sure that it's being deployed in line with your organization's, your values. So many steps of good governance, if not almost all of them, are not exclusive to the technology field. It's again, in line with basic laws and best practices. So whether you're talking about copyright laws or others, there are still many factors that are going to be decided by courts, or where we're going to have future laws that will help us decide what this looks like, how this plays out, what level of human intervention is required. In the meantime, again, we can use our agency and look at the fact that we know the laws on the books, and we can imagine in our plan accordingly. we know there's contract law towards, we know that the AI we're using, if we're using it in the HR context, there are civil rights laws that we need to make sure are complied with. If we are talking about it in the educational setting, in the art setting, we know laws that govern that context, and we need to be thoughtful about how AI could impede or augment those compliance factors.
I'm so glad that you started that with humans aren't going anywhere, essentially, because we started this little section with that fear, and we even have a question from our audience that basically asks, is there a chance that AI can replace human effort? And I'm so happy to hear, even at this early stage, that it's like, nah, we really still need people. We still need.
And I think I'll just jump in, and it has to be intentional, right? Like it's an easy to default and then end up realizing that not enough humans touched your project in the interim. And so really thinking about what are those points that if you're using these AI tools, that you start integrating humans in maybe different ways than you did before, right? So we asked ourselves a question: we could hire somebody to paint a portrait, or we can use these AI tools to create these portraits. We went in this AI direction for the authenticity that it would bring. How else are we engaging in creative artists? Like, what are the steps in which they're coming in, whether it's photography, whether it's historical research, whether it's digital touch-ups? Like, where are the ways in which the humans are part of this process?
Yeah. Jason, we have a question for you from the audience. They want to hear a little bit about specific examples about how you use AI in your work in theater.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have like you said in my introduction, a 20-year history as a production designer. And over the time that I did that, I came to love constraints, limitations, whether that's the fact that we choose opening night far before we ever start doing any work. And we start selling tickets, which puts the pressure on. The room is a certain size, it's a certain height, the budget is a certain amount. I love project constraints because there's a lot of fear around what we call blank canvas syndrome, where we have no idea what to do. But we always feel, and we even say the work expands to fill the time available. So if you finish early, you can always find some more to do. But as a designer, I meet a director at a restaurant for lunch, and we start with a napkin sketch. Are you talking about shaping the space this way or that way? And as a production designer, yes, I get to put columns if it's Greek, or I get to put this or that. But I also am basically building a playground for the director and the actors. I'm creating a negative space for them to occupy and to perform inside that has a lot of needs, right? And so to communicate that on a napkin sketch is really challenging. What if there were tools that could generate things that were more easy to visually understand, especially for non-visual people, and you could collaborate faster together, two people or a group of people collaborating faster, creating more and rejecting ideas faster and coming together. When we got Google Images as a scenic designer, it was amazing because what I had before was a giant book of clippings from magazines where we say, do you like this one? Oh, this was from Vogue. Do you like that one? And Google Images, we could bring up any picture that was ever taken, but now I can bring up pictures that were never taken. If we come up with two ideas that have never been synthesized in quite this way before, we can pull that up and get 1,000 variations, reject 950 of them. And even if we don't use any of the AI stuff in our work, it will enrich the conversation unbelievably so that we can collaborate faster and we get to the polish phase faster before the same deadline. So I love it in that way. It's also fun to use it. It's fun to when you see real AI things appear on stage. So I spoke with Gary McCann, who's a major opera designer internationally. He was doing Phantom of the Opera in Bucharest. And he was doing it when Midjourney version 3 came out. And if you remember, it was very creepy crawly, lots of like Art Nouveau whiplash curves, but kind of gothy. If you go back and look at production photos of that production, now that's a time capsule of where AI art was at that time, because he used its sort of creepy crawly feeling as part of expressing the macabre in Phantom. And so you can have it show up in your work, you can have it not show up in your work, but it's an incredible collaborative tool because we are never going to get rid of probably deadlines and budget limitations. I like to get to the polishing phase faster because it becomes richer, it becomes more my own.
The more we sit here and have this conversation, I'm just struck by the meat of this conversation, right? We are talking about AI in its early stages and this journey from where we were 10, 15 years ago, 5 years ago, to where we are today. All of us on this screen existed in a time before the internet, before, like you had already said, Jason, before internet, before cell phones, before a computer. And look at how far we've come. You know, we have a question that talks about tensions to adaptation. I say that we all existed in the time before the internet because we all are that generation that had to adapt to learn this new technology, and it's enhanced our lives. And here we are again talking about this new technology and how it will enhance our lives. But we all tend to be at institutions that have existed forever and tend to be slow moving. So could you all talk to a little bit about what those tensions might be involved in adapting to institutions like a Ford's, like Mount Vernon, that may be a little bit more hesitant to incorporating it into? What are those challenges? Allison,
I know you guys were laughing at me when I said tiptoeing, right? Because we did go pretty deep in this one project, but I think, you know, there's an idea of there's all this potential, but what are the realistic, you know, practical applications that could benefit our visitors and benefit our scholars in ways that we can't quite see now. And so I think you don't want to sort of jump on the bandwagon and just be like, okay, now this at the same time, you know. So I think the tension comes from what's the impact of doing something new, because it's hard to take risks and try things new when you run a big historic organization and just like, okay, well, now we'll do this. You can't be too nimble with these decisions. So I think figuring out like one of the ways in which to prioritize things and where you want to take your risks and for an institution to be able to respond quickly. That's kind of a vague answer, but that's definitely a lived answer.
Yeah, no, you know, Jason already talked about how he uses it to get to deadlines faster. I think at Ford's, you know, we're both a active producing theater and a historic site. So we have all these opportunities to incorporate AI that just seem scary. And the reality is if we use AI, and I'm sure our designers are using AI, I'm certain they are. I'm seeing the renderings. They're amazing. So, you know, it puts us to like you said, Jason, getting us to our end goal faster, but then we're a theater. So there's always something that we can fix. So there's always something else we can talk about. There's always more that we can put on our plate. So now are we creating more work for ourselves because we've, you know, quickened the design process? We have a computer that can help us answer questions that we may not be able to draw out. You know, it can be a lot, because then you're like, okay, well, now I have all this extra time. What do we do with it?
That hasn't happened yet.
There are a lot of people preparing for that. What are we going to do with all this free time? Actually, a lot of people are investing more in the entertainment space with that expectation. But what I'm most pleased to hear about is that you all are playing with it. And I think the key is, what's a safe way? What's a safe space to play with it? You know, what is a way that it would actually create a harm, potentially create a risk, and thinking through it. But, you know, I really think AI abstinence is not an option. I think it's our future, and our future is here, and we all need to partake. So it's imagining, what are some of the risks, thinking about privacy and safety concerns, thinking about security. How does this create a cybersecurity threat? Asking the questions will get you far. But the reason you have to ask those questions is because you do need to explore how it can benefit your life and your work. And there's a lot of exciting ways, like Jason mentioned in productivity. There was some really good work done with call centers, where an area where there's been a lot of experimentation with AI, and they found that it across the board increased call center employee efficiency by 15%. So all call center, not replaced them, it augmented their efficiency by 15%. The difference was much greater with the less skilled workers. So for those who were newer to the call center, there was a 35% increase in their productivity. Less so for those that were veterans in the field. But then you have other areas where you want to think 2 and 3 times. So there's been a lot of work with AI therapists. For a lot of areas, a lot of parts of the world, there is not enough access to therapists. Fewer than a third of Americans live in communities where there are enough mental health providers to meet local demand. Again, this is an area you want to go very carefully, but it's really interesting because in some recent studies, they've shown that there was a 51% reduction in depression symptoms when users were given access to these AI therapists. Again, looking at the risks between training call center employees versus augmenting mental therapy treatment is a huge differential on risk, but knowing how many children, how many parents could be benefited from this tool if we go about it safety and put the safeguard. I hope everyone hears me saying, and put the appropriate safeguards in place. Not that you give an AI chatbot to a kid and you say, go at it. You say, this is a toy. This is something that you can, putting the appropriate safeguards in place so that it can create that benefit that we're hoping to realize.
I'm glad you mentioned access because we do have a question here about the resources that AI requires. And if, the future is now and we're here and it's encouraged that we use AI, and AI is literally everywhere. I mean, Apple did an update and now we can make our own photos in text form, which is a lot. They're encouraging you to get involved, not treat this as a big, scary new, but like this brand new adventure to be on. What are some of, and I think Miriam, you might be able to answer this, but if, Jason, Allison, if you all have thoughts, questions, or other on this question, please jump in. But what kind of resources does it require? Is AI widening or closing our information gap because we are now able to access everywhere? Are there places where we may not be able to access? Are the computers large? Like where do we store all of this?
Yeah, does it open access or close access? It's a really great question, but because a lot of this is actually self-selected. Like I mentioned earlier, there's gender and age and regional gaps as to who is and is not using AI. So if we look at the future, which again, I argue is here and I would argue is inevitable, those who know how to use AI will often replace those who don't. So if you're self-selecting out and not playing with it and not figuring out what the risks and benefits are, you're not seeing, I cannot copy and paste because it will hallucinate and it will give me very confident, inaccurate information some of the time. If you're not realizing how much it can help you with the first draft of a project, someone else will do it in a way that will help them, but based on the patterns that the AI system will be able to provide those who are using it. So are we experiencing a potential gap in opportunity? Absolutely, based on who knows to use it, who's thinking to use it, who has access to the computers, the phones, the confidence and the curiosity, as well as the safeguards, having people around them to say, here are safe ways to use it, here are not. I mean, another risk of AI that we're seeing is undue reliance on it. So a lot of studies have found that too many people who are using it are now using it without question. And, none of us remember phone numbers anymore because of speed dial. In the same way, we're already seeing that AI is augmenting our memory and our critical thinking, and too many people are depending on it without that interrogation. Again, that agency has to be key in how we use it. So the opportunity gap is growing for a variety of reasons. Who's self-selecting out? Who is has people around them teaching them what the risks are, what are safe ways to do it, and how to continually use that agency so that it's augmenting your thought and your reasoning, and not being used as a cut and place that will get you in trouble for cheating, that will get overrun your ability to do critical thinking, and potentially harm and create liability, as well as put you in a situation where you didn't want to harm someone, but you are.
And I think Miriam's point also, helps show how important it is that AI is part of K-12 education, right? Like, because this is not something we want to protect students from. This is something we want to teach students how to use and how to identify and how to build and how to, become better contributors to the world through the tools at their disposal. And so, the ways in which we can constructively and support teacher adoption of AI in their instruction and students in their use of instruction, it has to be carefully integrated and thoughtfully integrated into teaching methodologies, because it's not going away, and it's going to be a part of whoever is participating in this work will be succeeding. And so the ways in which we can think about how we can support that integration into K-12 teaching I think is really important.
Gone are the days of getting your phone taken. Like when I was in high school in K-12, you couldn't have your phone. You couldn't have any technology outside of the computers that the school provided. So
the taboo approach of don't use it, right? Because students will use it. So how do you make sure that it's visible, it's transparent, that students and teacher together are seeing how that a tool changes and updates and improves or makes drawbacks in their work, right? Like having it be a part of the instruction.
Yep.
But Erica, and actually to Allison's point, many schools, if not most, are currently trying to ban use. My daughter's school prohibits use of AI, and as a result, there are some kids who are using it when they're cheating. There are a majority of kids who aren't learning how to use it effectively, and what a missed opportunity for a community to learn education for parents as well as students as well as teachers, as to here are safer ways to do it, where you can augment your thinking, where you can ensure, when you're talking about children, that you're respecting privacy rights and considerations, and all the other potential risks that you could be teaching about, that we're missing that opportunity by complete bans on its use.
That's really interesting. We have about 12 minutes left, and I would love to end on an up. And so I would love to hear from, because AI is scary. Like I'm just gonna rip it out. Some people it's scary for some people. For me, I'm like, this is exciting. I love this. I hope Ford incorporates more AI. We have some stuff, but how can we get fancier? But I would love to hear from each of you. What are some of the upcoming uses or features or processes that are AI related, or other, even just online technologies that you all are excited about working with that help improve your work? Let's start with Jason.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely endless. I was going to say a few minutes ago that we are dangerously early in AI, and the rate at which it's changing makes it almost even hard to appear for events like this, because something probably came out in the news while we were here that really impacted what's going on. But what I'm excited for the most, especially in the next year, is AI tools subtly appearing in every software and all the work that we do, just be supported and like an assistant, like a little helper in everything that we do. Like I was mentioning, in Photoshop, there are tools that will help you. In Microsoft Word, there are tools that will help you, and you may not even know it. But pre-AI, Microsoft Word suggestions were terrible. Oh, now they're pretty good. We're going to see it become a little more boring, I hope, and it will become more reliable, and it will become something that we can get back to being people and achieving our goals, but we can do that a little bit better, a little bit faster. And the disruption we'll see that productivity explosion. where things you never thought could be interactive will be. And I hope that means that the digital world will be richer and closer to the real world.
Allison, go for it.
Well, I mean, I think I've talked a little bit about how I think it'll benefit history museums and undertold stories in our work. I think when I think about the potential of AI, I go outside of my knowledge base, but just things like discovering a cure to cancer. Like I feel like these big data challenges, like with human involvement in that process, we're going to be able to answer some big questions that are going to be able to really help us as humans, like be better in the world together. And I don't know what those look like, but when I think about just medical advances and supporting that the science of exploration with great science minds having this type of deep data mining available to them is really thought exciting.
Miriam.
Yeah, I love this question, and I love it so much that I have a podcast that comes out every 2 weeks where we get to ask people. I crowdsource the answers on this. And so on that podcast next week, you'll hear Andrew Ng, who is one of the visionaries in AI, talk about how he's trying to use AI in so many important ways, including education. His mandate is that we all learn coding. He thinks that he's contrary to what we are hearing, that you no longer need to know it. He thinks that we all need some understanding of what is happening under the hood and how to make sure that the machine is operating the way we want. But he's using it also for climate change to look for some of the solutions, which is really exciting because it's not an encouraging topic to see how much AI itself is impacting the environment. A Goldman Sachs survey showed that a ChatGPT search could be 10 times more electricity utilizing than a standard Google search query without Google Gemini AI enhancements. And Google searches in themselves were already pretty taxing. So I love that we can use AI as part of the solution. You can also hear a recent interview we had with Mason Grimshaw, who's Lakota and happened upon computer science at MIT and wanted to make sure he brought it back to his people. And so he's part of this wonderful group, Indigenous AI, that makes sure that kids that he grew up with, the next generation on the reservation, are learning coding and how to use it in really important ways for his community, including preserving native languages.
That's really, really interesting. I'm glad that you brought up the environment. We definitely had a question that I didn't get to about, is AI impacting the environment? And the answer is yes. Oh my goodness. Do you guys have any final thoughts for us at all? Nope.
I'm curious, Erica, if you have any thoughts about how it might apply in your workplace, or the things that Ford has been talking about.
Well, so at Ford's, I am one of the casting directors here at Ford's. So AI, when we were in pandemic, we talked a lot about software that would allow us to continue to see actors. How do we do virtual auditions? How do we get in a room with people when you can't be in the room with people? How do we maintain that? And so AI, I see for the work that I do, making it really equal parts easier and equal parts more difficult, because when you are casting, you want to be able to be in room with someone. Like, you want to be able to have that essence shared across the table. But AI may make it possible to have an actor who is out of country. A lot of times we have actors who have taken gigs out of the country, out of state, out of whatever, and Ford's tends to hire locally. So we want to make sure that they are close. But AI could mean that you could be on a gig in London and I'm here in DC and we enter a virtual room together, so there could be very exciting advancements in a very short amount of time that will make my job both harder and easier. And then, like Jason said, on the design front, our designers will come in and they'll be able to bring you into the set in a way that is no longer shared images in the Dropbox, you know? So there's all kinds of excitement that AI could bring to the arts world in this more tangible when you're working with people, when you have to work with people for the performing arts. So it's exciting. There are all kinds of big and scary things that I think that in the next 2-3 years, because Jason hit it, like we probably missed some big advancement in the 45 minutes we've been here. So yeah, AI is the future, and it is this, as Miriam said, is here, and we are figuring it out every day. So I also hope to see it incorporated into our exhibits. How can we make our exhibit more interactive, more accessible for people who may not come? We see so many tourists every single year in person at Ford's. And Ford's, I don't, if you've ever been to Ford's, it is not the largest campus. So in order to, it will help us be able to reach more people and further our story. And I think that is most important when you're working with a historic site, is how can we get our storytelling out there, accessible and accurate. And I think the AI will change a lot of lives on that front. So yeah.
The storytelling tools are getting stronger. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, no, they are. I'm glad you asked me because, you know, I'm just a host. Thank you for that. Well, thank you each. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Miriam. Thank you, Allison, for today's conversation. This has been eye-opening, exciting, and enlightening. We hope that you all at home enjoyed our conversation today, and we will continue to respond to any questions that we have that we may not have been able to get to in our live session today. So until next time, see you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.